Imagine a room with no windows, just four concrete walls closing in on you. The air is cold. The silence is loud. In the corner, a 19-year-old boy is curled up in a ball, shaking uncontrollably. His hands are covered in blood. But here is the terrifying part. The blood does not belong to him. Welcome to the story of Elijah Cross. In America, statistics tell us a painful truth. For every 10 men on death row, one is likely innocent. But Eli Cross was not just a statistic, he was a target. And his only crime was being a genius in a zip code that the world wanted to forget. Tonight, we are not just telling you a crime story. We are handing you the blueprint of a conspiracy so dark, it will make you question every skyscraper you see in your city. This is the story of how they tried to bury a young black architect, and how he used his mind to dig his way out. To understand the horror, you have to understand the boy. Eli Cross saw the world differently. Most people looked at the crumbling neighborhood of the Bottoms and saw poverty. They saw ruins. Eli saw geometry. He saw structure. He was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome at age 7. He didn't speak much. He didn't make eye contact. But he had a gift, a photographic memory that allowed him to recall every brick, every beam, and every angle of a building after seeing it just once. While other kids played basketball, Eli was in the library, memorizing blueprints of the city. He was the youngest architecture student in the state's history. He was supposed to be the one to rebuild his community. Instead, he became the perfect scapegoat for destroying it. It happened on a Tuesday night. Foggy, quiet. Eli had sneaked into the construction site of the new Skyline Tower. It was a massive luxury project being built right on top of the old community center. Eli wasn't there to steal. He was there because something about the foundation didn't look right in his head. He wanted to sketch it. He wanted to fix it. He sat in the shadows, his charcoal pencil moving fast across the paper. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Then, the voices came. 2 men walked into the site. One was wearing an expensive suit. The other was holding a hammer. Eli froze. He stopped breathing. From his hiding spot behind a concrete pillar, he watched an argument turn into an execution. He saw the hammer swing. He heard the sickening crack of bone. He saw the man in the suit fall. Panic took over. Eli's mind, usually so organized, shattered. He dropped his sketchbook. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the empty building. The killer turned around. He didn't see a witness. He saw an opportunity. When the police sirens wailed 10 minutes later, they didn't find the killer. They found Eli. He was kneeling beside the body, rocking back and forth, trying to mentally redesign the scene to make it make sense. He had picked up the hammer, confused, trying to move the object that didn't belong in his geometric pattern. The police didn't see a terrified autistic boy in shock. They saw a black teenager with a weapon. They didn't ask questions. They just clicked the handcuffs. Tight. And just like that, the architect became the monster. The interrogation room at the 4th Precinct was not designed for comfort. It was designed to break you. For Elijah Cross, it was a torture chamber. The fluorescent light overhead was broken. It flickered. Buzz, snap, buzz, snap. To you and me, it might be annoying. But to Eli, with his heightened sensory sensitivity, every flicker felt like a physical blow to the head. Sitting across from him was Detective Rick Grimes. They called him the Bulldog, not because he was tenacious in finding the truth, but because once he bit down on a suspect, he never let go until he tasted blood. Grimes knew exactly who he was dealing with. He had seen the medical file. He knew the boy was on the spectrum, and he weaponized it. Grimes didn't hit Eli. He didn't have to. He just leaned in close, too close. He tapped his pen on the metal table. Rhythmically, loudly, tap, tap, so many taps. He shifted the photos of the bloody crime scene right into Eli's line of sight. Grimes whispered, his voice rough like gravel. "You liked it, didn't you, Eli? You liked the way the skull cracked. It was just another shape to you, wasn't it?" Eli rocked back and forth in his chair, faster and faster. His hands covered his ears, trying to block out the noise, the light, the smell of stale coffee and aggression. He hummed a low note to calm himself, but Grimes just laughed. He turned to the two-way mirror and smirked. He knew that to a jury, a rocking, humming boy didn't look autistic. He looked deranged. He looked like a killer without a conscience. Outside that room, the machinery of destruction was already moving at full speed. The media didn't wait for facts. They were hungry for a narrative, and the police fed them a feast. Within hours, the headlines were screaming. The architect of death, the savage of the bottoms. They dug up Eli's middle school records. They found a fight he had in the 6th grade when a bully destroyed his drawings. They spun it. They called it a history of violence. They erased the honor roll student. They erased the scholarship winner. They erased the boy who designed wheelchair ramps for the elderly in his church. Instead, they painted a picture of a monster lurking in the shadows of the ghetto. A thug who bludgeoned a respected senator to death in a drug-induced rage. Nobody asked about the drug test results, because there were none. Eli had never touched a drug in his life. But the truth was boring. Fear sells, and America was buying it. Days turned into weeks. Eli was moved to county jail, cell block 8. The smell of urine and rust was overwhelming. He was given a public defender named Mr. Gable, a man who looked like he hadn't slept in a decade, a man whose suit was cheap and whose eyes were empty. Gable met Eli for exactly 5 minutes. He didn't even sit down. He stood by the bars, looking at his watch. "Look, kid," Gable said, not even making eye contact. "They have you at the scene. They have the weapon in your hand. The senator is dead. This is a slam dunk for the DA. If we go to trial, they will fry you. Lethal injection. Do you understand?" Eli stared at the floor, tracing the cracks in the concrete with his eyes. Gable sighed, annoyed by the silence. "Here is the deal. You plead guilty to manslaughter. You say you were scared. You say it was an accident. We beg for 20 years. With good behavior, you get out when you are 40. It is the best I can do. Sign the paper. 20 years. Eli looked at his hands. The hands that were meant to build skyscrapers. The hands that were meant to lift his mother out of poverty. 20 years meant his life was over. He didn't kill anyone. He wanted to say it. He wanted to scream it. But the words were stuck in his throat, blocked by the terror that had frozen his mind. He went silent. Total shutdown. In his cell, Eli stopped eating. He stopped sleeping. He used his fingernails to scratch into the paint of the cell wall. Lines, angles, measurements. The guards laughed as they walked by. "Look at the crazy kid," they said. "He's drawing invisible castles." But he wasn't drawing castles. He was drawing the crime scene. From memory, every shadow, every blood spatter. And most importantly, the angles of the room that proved he couldn't have done it. But nobody looked. Nobody cared. Until the obsidian arrived. It was a Tuesday morning when the heavy steel doors of the visitation room clanked open. But it wasn't Mr. Gable who walked in. The air in the room shifted. The temperature seemed to drop. A man walked in. Tall, impeccable black suit, skin the color of deep midnight. He didn't walk like a lawyer. He walked like a king entering his court. This was Marcus Thorne, the head of the Obsidian Collective, a shadow organization that didn't just fight for justice, they hunted for it. Thorne didn't sit on the visitor's side. He didn't wait for the guards to tell him the rules. He pulled up a chair right next to Eli. The guards shifted uncomfortably, but they didn't say a word. Marcus Thorne had that effect on people. He radiated power. He looked at Eli, who was still staring at the table, rocking slightly. Thorne didn't speak loud. He didn't use the fake soft voice people use for children. He spoke clearly, sharp, precise. Eli, Thorne said, I saw the photos of your cell wall. Eli stopped rocking. I know you aren't drawing castles, Thorne continued, sliding a high-quality sketchbook and a drafting pencil across the metal table. You are drawing a cross-section of the Skyline Tower foundation, and you notice that the load-bearing pillar on the north side is 3 feet off from the blueprints. Eli's head snapped up. His eyes, usually avoiding contact, locked onto Thorne's. For the first time in months, someone was speaking his language, the language of geometry, the language of truth. Thorne leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The police say you swung that hammer from the left, but based on the blood spatter you scratched into that wall, the attacker had to be standing on the raised platform, striking downward at a 45-degree angle. You are 5'9". You couldn't reach that angle unless you were floating. Eli's hand reached out, trembling. He touched the pencil. Thorne smiled, a cold, dangerous smile, not directed at Eli, but at the world outside those walls. They think you are stupid, Eli. They think your silence is a confession. They built a cage for a monster, but they locked up an architect. Thorne tapped. The pencil moved across the paper like a living thing. Swoosh, scratch, snap. Within an hour, Eli had recreated the entire skeleton of the Skyline Tower. But he didn't stop there. He drew an arrow pointing to a specific section of the sub-basement, a section that wasn't on the official city plans. Beside the arrow, he wrote one word: empty. Marcus Thorne took the drawing. He didn't need to ask what it meant. He knew that in architecture, empty spaces are never truly empty. They are hiding places. While Eli remained behind bars, the Obsidian Collective went to work. They are not like the police. They don't need warrants. They don't follow protocols. They operate in the gray. Under the cover of a moonless night, a team of 3 shadowed figures slipped past the security perimeter of the Skyline construction site. The air inside the unfinished skyscraper was heavy. It smelled of wet concrete and something else, something old, something rotting. Guided by Eli's sketch, they descended into the bowels of the building, down into the dark, past the parking levels, past the mechanical rooms, until they reached the foundation wall that Eli had marked. According to the city blueprints, this should have been solid earth, but Eli's photographic eye had noticed the ventilation shafts. Why would you need ventilation for solid dirt? One of the Obsidian operatives pulled out a thermal scanner. He pointed it at the wall. The screen glowed blue. Then, a patch of angry red. Heat. Electronics. There was a room behind that concrete. They drilled a small hole. Snake camera in. What they saw on the monitor would freeze the blood in your veins. It wasn't just a hidden office. It was a desecration. The Skyline Tower, this billion-dollar monument to luxury, was being built directly on top of the historic Freedmen's Cemetery, a burial ground for former slaves from the 1800s. The law required the developers to halt construction and relocate the bodies with dignity. But that would cost millions. That would delay the project for years. So, the developers decided to pour concrete over history. They decided to crush the bones of our ancestors under the weight of a parking garage. But the camera saw something else on the floor of that secret room. A digital voice recorder. It had fallen into a gap between the old crypts and the new foundation. The senator. He hadn't gone there to inspect the building. He had gone there to meet his business partner, a man named Councilman Sterling. The senator wanted out. He couldn't stomach the guilt. He threatened to go public, and that was why he had to die. Eli Cross hadn't just witnessed a murder. He had walked into the middle of a cover-up worth $500 million. The shape he saw, that didn't fit. It wasn't a beam. It was a grave marker that they hadn't fully covered up. Back in the prison cell, Eli felt a shift in the air. He didn't know what Marcus Thorne had found, but he felt lighter. For the first time in weeks, the noise in his head quieted down. He slept, but the system wasn't done with him yet. The day of the trial arrived like a storm. The Los Angeles Superior Court was packed. Reporters, protesters, angry mothers holding signs that read, "Justice for the Senator." They wanted a villain, and the prosecution was ready to give them one. The district attorney, a woman named Harper Vance, stood up. She was sharp, theatrically angry. She pointed a manicured finger at Eli. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice dripping with rehearsed sorrow. "The defendant sits there, looking small, looking harmless. But do not be deceived. Beneath that quiet exterior lies a violent rage. He didn't just kill a man, he butchered him. We have the weapon. We have the fingerprints. We have the witness testimony of Detective Grimes. This is not a mystery. This is a tragedy caused by a disturbed young man who should have been off our streets years ago." The jury looked at Eli. They saw the way he wouldn't make eye contact. They saw him fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. To them, it looked like guilt. Detective Grimes took the stand. He looked confident, smug. He told the story he had invented. He talked about how Eli confessed, even though Eli had never said a word. He talked about how dangerous the streets were. He played to the jury's fear. The bulldog was barking, and the jury was eating it up. But then, it was time for the defense. Marcus Thorne stood up. He didn't bring a stack of papers. He didn't bring a notepad. He brought a projector remote. He walked to the center of the room and stood in silence for a long, uncomfortable minute. He let the tension build until the air felt thin. He turned to the jury. "The prosecution told you a story about a monster," Thorne said, his voice low, vibrating with controlled fury. "But they forgot to tell you where the monster lives. It doesn't live in my client. It doesn't live in the bottoms." He clicked the remote. A massive, high-definition 3D rendering appeared on the screen. It was Eli's drawing, but digitized, animated. "It lives." Thorne pointed at the screen. "In the foundation of the city itself." Thorne turned to Detective Grimes, who was still sitting in the witness box. The smirk on the detective's face faltered. "Just a little." "Detective," Thorne asked, "you testified that you found the defendant standing over the body, correct?" "Correct," Grimes said. "And you said the blood spatter on his clothes proves he swung the hammer." "That is what the forensics say," Grimes replied, annoyed. Thorne clicked the remote again. The simulation on the screen changed. It showed the physics of the swing. It showed the height of the killer. "Interesting," Thorne said, "because according to simple geometry and the laws of physics, for the blood to land on Eli's shoes in that specific pattern, the killer would have to be 6 feet, 4 inches tall. Eli is 5'9". Thorne took a step closer to the witness stand, like a predator closing in on prey. "But you know who is 6'4", Detective?" Grimes swallowed hard. His eyes darted to the exit. "Councilman Sterling is 6'4", Thorne whispered. "The man who signed your overtime checks last month." "Objection!" the DA screamed, jumping to her feet. "Speculation." Thorne didn't flinch. He didn't even look at the judge. He looked straight into the camera at the back of the room. "I am not speculating, Your Honor. I am introducing new evidence. Exhibit A." The courtroom doors swung open. An obsidian operative walked in, holding a plastic bag. Inside it was the digital recorder found in the grave of the ancestors. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was the silence of a lie dying. Judge Grayson looked at the plastic bag, then at the defense attorney. With a trembling hand, he nodded. "Proceed." Thorne placed the recorder on the evidence table. He pressed play. The audio was grainy at first, static. Then, voices cut through the noise. Clear, undeniable. Voice 1. The senator. "Please, we can't do this. Those are human remains down there. If the press finds out we built on a cemetery, it's over." Voice 2. Deep, arrogant, unmistakably Councilman Sterling. "You have no vision, Senator. History is just dirt. We pour concrete over dirt every day. Now sign the permit, or you end up like the ghosts." Then, a scuffle, a sickening thud, silence, and then, one final sound. The heavy breathing of a man exerting himself, and the squeak of dress shoes on concrete. Thorne stopped the tape. The courtroom erupted. It wasn't just noise, it was chaos. The DA's face went pale, the color draining away like water. She looked at Detective Grimes. Grimes was no longer the bulldog. He was a cornered rat. He stood up, knocking his chair over, looking for a way out. But the bailiffs were already moving. Thorne didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just turned to the jury and said 3 words. "The blueprint never lies." The gavel banged. Once, twice. But nobody heard it over the shouts of the crowd. The judge ordered the immediate arrest of Councilman Sterling and Detective Grimes on charges of conspiracy and first-degree murder. And then, he looked at the boy in the orange jumpsuit. "Elijah Cross," the judge said, his voice barely audible over the din. "Case dismissed. You are free to go." Free. The word hung in the air. But as the handcuffs were clicked off Eli's wrists, he didn't cheer. He didn't cry. He rubbed his wrists where the metal had bitten into his skin. He looked at his mother in the front row, tears streaming down her face. Then he looked at Marcus Thorne. Thorne gave a slight nod. A warrior acknowledging a survivor. Eli walked out of the courthouse into the blinding afternoon sun. The cameras were there again. Flash, flash, flash. But this time the questions were different. They weren't asking about the monster. They were asking about the corruption. They were asking about the cemetery. But Eli didn't stop. He pulled his hood up. He wasn't interested in their apologies. He walked past the reporters, past the police line, and stood on the sidewalk. He looked up at the skyline of the city, the shapes, the angles. He realized something terrifying. The city wasn't just built on steel and glass. It was built on secrets. It was built on bones. The system had tried to bury Eli Cross. They thought he was just another brick in the wall, another casualty of gentrification. But they forgot one thing. When you try to bury a seed, it grows. Eli is free now. He's back in school. But he doesn't draw skyscrapers anymore. He designs memorials. He designs spaces that force the world to remember what it tries to forget. But ask yourself this. How many others are still in cages? How many geniuses are sitting in cell block 8 right now, staring at the wall, waiting for someone to understand their language? We cannot wait for a Marcus Thorne to save us. We cannot wait for a miracle. We have to be the architects of our own justice. We have to read the blueprints of the system, find the cracks, and tear it down ourselves. This was the story of the blood blueprint. But the construction isn't over. If this story made your blood boil, good. Use that heat. Share this video. Wake up your neighbors. Because the next time they try to pour concrete over our history, we need to be there to stop the mixer. This is Black Mystery. We don't just tell stories. We expose the truth. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. And never, ever let them bury you in silence. We are watching.